If we are used to producing images in offline render engines such as V-Ray and Arnold, then we will probably be familiar with the color bleed effect that comes along for free whenever global illumination is used in an environment. We see this because as light rays bounce around the environment, they both pick up and deposit color on various surfaces that they strike. When a photon hits a surface that has a high color saturation, for instance, then the color is collected, but when the energy of the photon gets absorbed by another surface, it leaves color behind. Hence, color bleed, or color bounce as it is oftentimes called. Because of this naturally occurring phenomenon, we may at times find that our scenes have picked up a distracting color wash, or going in the other direction, that it doesn't have enough color bleed in order to either look realistic or suit our needs. The question then is, how do we actually go about controlling color bleed in Unreal? Well, in our 03_04 level, our objects have a variety of plain grey materials applied, which as you would expect has produced a monochromatic GI solution. Having applied a red material to the floor though, watch what happens when we go ahead and rebake the lighting. We see that because of the saturation value on the material, our entire scene has been somewhat overpowered with a red wash, which, whilst possibly being physically correct, may, from an artistic point of view, not be quite so desirable. Let's access the material's properties by double-clicking on it in the content browser then, and take a look at the options that we could use to dial this down a bit. Well, we could lower the saturation of the base color on the material, as that would in turn reduce the color bleed effect. But what if we, or our client, really likes the particular shade of red that we have? Well, thankfully, we can actually perform a GI switch in Unreal at the material level. In other words, we can use one color on the visual mesh and set another to be used for the GI light bake. Let's right-click in our material graph then, type the letters GI, and add a GI replace node. We can pipe our vector 3 node into the default slot, which will be the color that we see on the object. And then copy the color node and pipe it into the static indirect slot, which is the color that will be used for the GI calculation. If we then click on the color swatch, we can make some changes to this. Now, to keep the illumination levels in the scene as they are, we will want to leave the value as is, although altering this is one way in which we can control light bounce on a per material basis. But as what we want to do here is just dial back on the color bleed effect, we want to lower the color's saturation by about 75%, so a value of about 0.35-ish. After which we can save, apply, and then close the material editor. Now, personally speaking, I think that removing all color bleed from a scene only leads to creating an unnatural looking environment, as our brains know that a bright red floor should kick at least some color around the room. But I will of course leave that artistic choice up to you and or your clients. Let's rebuild our lighting then. And as you can see, whilst we still have our saturated red floor, the color bleed or color bounce coming from it is nowhere near as strong as what we had before. Now, another way in which we could control color bleed in Unreal would be again to access the material, and in its options, perform a search for the word diffuse. Notice that we have this light mass specific boost control that lets us fine-tune how much this particular material will contribute to static lighting in the scene. Do be aware though that using this option, although reducing color bleed, also reduces how much the material contributes to the lighting solution itself. In other words, as we dial this back, we will get less illumination in the scene and so consequently a less realistic lighting result. Being able to control color bleed then can certainly help us art direct and tweak our finished GI solution until it feels just right for our needs.